Not gonna lie, I'm running out of ideas for this bit. And spoilers ahead.
Today, Scooby-Doo meets Batman and Robin.
Another camping trip is ruined when the gang become entangled in a scheme perpetrated by Gotham City's two most notorious supervillains. Once again, the Caped Crusaders are there to help. Unlike their last appearance, this time Joker and Penguin are working for themselves as they try to steal the latest invention of a renowned but somewhat scatterbrained scientist, Professor Flaky. They do so by kidnapping the man and holding him in their secret cave hideout in a forest outside Gotham City.
Hey, Scoob, get that piece of wood. Wow, like that's the first time I ever saw a horse with wood growing out of its head.
I know Shaggy and Scooby aren't exactly the brightest lights in a chandelier, but they don't know what a deer is. Incidentally, a fan site says that's a moose, but moose do not have antlers like that. That's a deer.
Can we help in any way?
Yes. If you see or hear anything strange, signal us by flashing the headlights of your mystery machine. But kids, don't stick your necks out. Joker and Penguin are master criminals that can be dangerous.
Instead of telling the kids to leave the forest where a couple of known violent criminals are hiding, Batman instead asks them to keep an eye out for anything suspicious and signal him if they see anything. That does track with Batman's history of putting teenagers in danger. To scare away and confuse snoopers, Joker and Penguin dress as a dryad and a troll respectively and maintain a rotating bridge to keep vehicles from reaching the side of the ravine that holds their hideout.
What would you do with a sighing flute?
A sighing flute?
A flying suit made of rubber.
Imagine pulling a job and flying away into the night.
The invention in question is a flying suit developed by Professor Flaky, which the two supervillains hope to use as a means of escape after committing future crimes. This means that their scheme here isn't going to be immediately profitable for Joker and Penguin, but rather an investment for later. This is then one of the rarer Scooby episodes that don't involve a hidden treasure like with Bluestone the Great, stolen money like with The Witch and Zombie or Ben, Bing, and Bertha, or a revenge plot like with Carl the Stuntman. Carl the Stuntman. Abduction is always a bad idea for the bad guys, especially considering they almost never have any intention to do physical harm. This lack of threat removes any reason for the victim to cooperate with their kidnapper, and their discovery or escape is only a matter of time. Sure, modern Joker and Penguin wouldn't think twice about murder, or even once when it comes to Joker, but in this era of the Batman mythos, these two were reasonably harmless and were caught by the end of almost every story in which they appeared. It wouldn't take long for the authorities to find them and the Professor, as seen by how quickly Batman and Robin arrived in the forest. Kidnapping in the Scooby franchise is nothing new, nor is stealing a profitable invention. In fact, sometimes both of those happen in the same episode. Dressing up as a monster is also pretty much every Scooby villain's go-to method for concealing their crime. The rotating bridge can't even be said to be exceptional, because the same concept was used in the first appearance of Joker and Penguin with Mrs. Baker's rotating house. Even Joker and Penguin's hideout is essentially the same as last time, with booby traps and mechanical devices meant to frighten, but not really harm intruders.
We know you've perfected a new invention, Professor Flaky. We might be interested in buying it if we knew what it was.
Worst of all, though, is the fact that the villains plotted to kidnap Professor Flaky to steal his invention without knowing what his new device even was. This means their entire design was created with absolutely zero thought given to how much they could make from it. It wasn't until after they learned about the flying suit did they understand how handy it would be to have while committing robberies. What would they have done if Flaky's invention was something necessary but benign, like a new way of extracting oil from soybeans, or ridiculous, like an 8-track cassette rewinder? Joker and Penguin get a design score of 1 out of 5. Their plot wasn't unique nor immediately profitable. Apart from their hideouts' booby traps, they didn't seem to have spent any time planning it out, and it was easily discovered by Batman, Robin, and the Scooby Gang. The whole scheme was simply not worth the risk of getting caught. Joker and Penguin have the same problem in this episode as their earlier appearance. What is the point of a disguise for a supervillain over and above their regular costumed persona? Just running into either of them as is should have been enough to scare anyone away. This would be like if Jason Voorhees wore a Frankenstein mask over his usual hockey mask.
Creepers, what is that?
I'd say it's a dryad.
A dry what? A dryad. A tree spirit. They live in the forests.
This time around, Joker and Penguin dress as a dryad and a troll. Both costumes are unique, as neither have appeared in any earlier Scooby episode. In fact, while trolls are a favorite fairy tale and fantasy world monster, a forest spirit like a dryad is not something that typically shows up in pop culture. As their hideout is in a cave located in a forest, a dryad makes for a suitable choice for the setting. Or would, except those tree spirits are more of a European idea than North American. I'm not saying this continent couldn't have them, but it's not something most Americans watching this Scooby episode at the time would have likely appreciated. If anything, this would have been the right episode for a Bigfoot disguise.
But it can't be real. Dryads exist only in myths and fairy tales like elves and trolls.
Well, that must be a figment of our imagination.
Daphne is now gaslighting herself. The dryad is also not the only costume Joker wears.
Away! Away! Or you'll meet your doom. Blah, 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 blah.
Batman's greatest nemesis is literally wearing a sheet, pretending to be a ghost, and going blah blah blah. That's going to cost them some points.
Ah! Oh!
Let's get a closer look at it.
Right. We'll drive up close.
It's also going to cost them points for not being scary. If the teenagers you're trying to frighten off want to get a closer look at your costume, you're doing it wrong.
Yoinks!
Blah, 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 blah.
Sure, Shaggy and Scooby are their usual frightened selves, but again, that means so very little when it comes to those two. After all, just a couple of episodes earlier, Shaggy scared Scooby shitless by sticking his thumbs in his ears and going blah blah blah. For their outfits, I'm giving Joker and Penguin a 2.5 out of 5. They were unique and appropriate, but not very scary. Also, wearing a sheet? Really? I've mentioned before that some Scooby episodes begin with the villain nearly having succeeded in their scheme, like how in the Davy Jones episode, the singer's uncle was about to give the castle away. This episode features the complete opposite, where the authorities are already closing in on the villains. It's important to differentiate between them because this can turn a typical Scooby-Doo episode into little more than the gang making a guest appearance on their own show. Do the gang even make a difference here? Joker and Penguin's capture is practically guaranteed, and the viewer is just wasting their time watching shenanigans that don't really play a significant role in the episode. Could the two supervillains have done anything to get away with their crime, or even just avoid arrest? What keeps this from being a Batman and Robin episode that happens to feature Scooby-Doo is that Batman and Robin aren't really in it much, making this more of an extended cameo than guest appearance. Like I said when discussing the design of their scheme, Joker and Penguin didn't even know what they were stealing in the first place. They were simply convinced that surely whatever prolific inventor like Professor Flaky happened to be focused on at the time would be worth stealing.
Don't call me Shirley.
Instead of kidnapping the professor and demanding he divulge his secrets, they should have just surreptitiously followed him to the rubber factory. Once there, upon learning his new invention was a flying suit, only then should they have made their plans to steal it. Joker should have gone by himself, tied up Professor Flaky, put on the suit, and flew away to Penguin, who would have been ready to go with a getaway car. The flying suit was not only a device worth stealing, but it also provided potential thieves with an immediate escape route. Hell, if anything, instead of kidnapping Professor Flaky to learn what he was working on, they should have first learned what he was working on, then kidnap him and force him to make another flying suit. And maybe make the second suit a bit roomier, since Penguin isn't exactly Christian Bale in The Machinist. This is a particular sticking point, as we're talking about Joker and Penguin here. Neither one of these two are exactly known for being able to share. That flying suit was eventually going to be their one ring, and sooner or later, one of them is going to be knocked unconscious while the other flew away, laughing his ass off. The theft aside, as with their last appearance, many of Joker and Penguin's actions in this episode were more excuses to screw with trespassers than hide their lair.
This way, Scooby.
Shh! Someone's on our side of the river.
Like if we're gonna get back to Camp Scoob, we gotta cross this bridge.
If they don't enter, we won't have any fun.
Relax, you rollicking rogue. I'll make them enter.
Zoinks!
Blah, 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 blah.
For example, at one point, Shaggy and Scooby end up on the side of the ravine that holds Joker and Penguin's hideout. The boys are leery about crossing the rotating bridge until Penguin scares them into running through it. That should have been it. Shaggy and Scooby would have reached the other side, and thus the location of Joker and Penguin's secret cave would have been safe. Except halfway through, Joker turns the bridge, so Shaggy and Scooby end up on the wrong side of the ravine again. This should have irritated Penguin, as he's usually only ever in it for the money, while it's the Joker who never misses an opportunity to play pranks. Perhaps the Clown Prince of Crime has become a bad influence on the Gentleman of Crime. This does end up biting them in the ass, as Batman and Robin see their rotating bridge shenanigans. If they had simply left the ravine after scaring Shaggy and Scooby to the other side, they would have been long gone before their dynamic duo arrived in their helicopter.
Helicopter.
Yes, I know technically it's called the Batcopter, but I couldn't do a callback to helicopter if I had referred to it like that now, could I? Of course, the gang were on their way in the Mystery Machine, so perhaps to keep them from crossing the ravine, either Joker or Penguin may have wanted to remain close by to turn the bridge. But leaving it like they did just guaranteed Shaggy and Scooby staying there to save their friends.
Hey, look, Scoob, a wheel. I wonder what it's for. Oh, I get it. Like when the bridge turns, it makes this wheel go round.
I'm starting to understand why Shaggy thought a deer was a horse with wood growing out of its head. Speaking of the bridge, why did Batman and Robin leave it like that? Sure, they were after Joker and Penguin, but having the bridge remain in that position was just asking for innocent travelers to get hurt. Or did the two crime fighters assume that Shaggy or Scooby would realize how dangerous it was and would naturally turn the bridge back to where it needed to be? If so, what were they thinking? Shaggy thought a deer was a horse with wood growing out of its head. Leaving the bridge like that is literally the most dangerous Joker and Penguin are in the episode. And it wasn't even an intentional act, as they left it that way after panicking over the arrival of Batman and Robin.
There, you fairy tale felons, Robin. We'll be over them in a matter of seconds.
They haven't a chance. No trees, no bushes, no place to hide.
Just how fast can Joker and Penguin run?
So much for finesse. Tell us where it is or else.
Even their interrogation of Professor Flaky consisted of no worse than firmly shaking the inventor. In fact, it almost looks like the professor is enjoying it, like he's getting a massage. There's a joke to be made here with Joker and a happy ending, but I'm not going there. I will, however, be going to Joker and Penguin's operation score of 1 out of 5. Nothing they did was effective. Nothing they did was scary. Nothing they did was violent. This leaves the two villains with a final due score of 1.5 out of 5. Even James Gunn wouldn't have been able to figure out a way of making these versions of the Joker and Penguin into anything remotely good.
We spotted the villains below, so we dropped our bat cage.
Sorry we goofed, Shaggy. That's okay. Like it's a pleasure to be captured by good guys for a change.
What?
Considering most of the time Shaggy and Scooby get caught in one of Fred's traps, I can't help but wonder if Shaggy isn't unconsciously revealing his true feelings about his leader. But can you blame him when Fred and the rest are always gaslighting him and Scooby?
Let's go, Shaggy. We're gonna check out that weirdo. Hey, like I gotta find Scooby first. Okay, we'll come back for you.
See you later, Shaggy. Have fun being alone in this deep, dark forest where we know two violent criminals are hiding. Good luck finding our missing dog without even a flashlight. Worst friends ever. Shaggy really did mean that line about not ever being caught by the good guys, didn't he?
Where do you think they could have gone?
Who knows? With the Joker and Penguin on the loose, Shag and Scoob might be in trouble.
So why did you drive off and leave them alone in the first place, Fred? Wait a minute. I thought they left Shaggy behind.
Like, hooray! Here comes the mystery machine!
Are you sure, Shaggy? Because it's not painted the same as the Mystery Machine usually is. The green and blue on the bottom half are swapped.
There's the cave. See it?
Fred was clearly alone in the Mystery Machine before arriving at the cave.
Jeepers, Shaggy, you call this a hideout?
No, I call it a cave.
It's just a little hole in the cliff.
Well, let's take a look inside anyways.
Wait, why is Shaggy the one trying to convince the gang to go inside? He and Scooby should be running away from the spooky hole in the side of the cliff.
The girls are right, Shag. Nobody in his right mind would use this as a secret hideout.
I would.
Like I said, nobody in his right mind. Come on, let's go.
Jesus, what an asshole! Fred is just the worst in this series.
Look, another passageway. Come on, gang. We're gonna search these caverns.
Not us. Like you could get lost in there.
Right.
Coming here was your idea, Shaggy. It's a little too late to back out now.
We're interested in exiting, so we'll stay right here. By the exit.
Well, okay. If you see anything weird in here, holler real loud.
Yes, because Fred, Daphne, and Velma are certain to take Shaggy and Scooby seriously if they claim to see anything weird.
Pulling a job and flying away into the night. The Cape Crusaders could never catch us.
Batman and Robin have a helicopter.
Helicopter.
Ah, visitors.
Probably those tiresome teenagers.
Oh, that Joker. He's such a character. Especially when he does his Penguin impersonation.
Real spirits couldn't possibly be as evil as Penguin and Joker. Look at that cute little chipmunk.
That's a squirrel, not a chipmunk. World's greatest detective.
Being a penguin, I have an affinity for seals.
Seals eat penguins. As a penguin, he shouldn't have an affinity for them.
Whoever owns this cave must have spent a fortune to put that big lake in here. Huh? Like a swimming pool would have been enough, Scoob.
First thinking a deer was a horse with wood growing out of its head, and now this. Even Scooby thinks Shaggy is a moron. Where is the rope going?
And when those poor, deluded villains arrive, they'll find a reception committee waiting for them. Us.
Is this really the right time not to be wearing any pants, Batman?
Wow! Donuts!
Hey, like these aren't donuts.
In my videos, I've mostly avoided the tired old joke that Shaggy was a massive stoner, but all the dumb things he says and does in this episode is really making it difficult not to resort to that.
Professor, is one of your machines running?
Machines? Oh, no. That's a helicopter outside.
A helicopter?
Helicopter.
What's the deal with that conveyor? This isn't taking place in an abandoned factory. The Gotham Rubber Company was still in business and would presumably keep their machinery in working order. This also looks less like a broken piece of equipment and more like a piece of artwork that wasn't finished. The rollers are smeared and the edges are brushed into the background. Were these originally two separate layouts that the background artist either forgot or ran out of time to combine properly?
Blithering bombast. Let's go after the beach ball bombardiers.
What were 1970s beach balls made of? Perhaps the boomers really were a lot tougher than us.
When Joker and Penguin break in to steal the invention...
I get it. Like I said before, we'll be the reception committee.
Right. To the welcome wagon.
This is another one that might be lost on modern audiences. The Welcome Wagon was a company that would partner with local businesses to offer coupons and information to people who moved into a new town, usually through a hostess who would greet new homeowners once they got settled in. Technically, the company is still around, but the days of a white-gloved middle-aged woman coming to your door with a basket of dollar-off coupons is long gone.
Penguin, use your umbrella as a spear. Puncture the flying suit.
An excellent idea, Joker. Here goes. Drat! The Crusaders have the suit.
How did the Penguin get his umbrella back?
Well, you captured them again, Batman. Congratulations.
Speaking of umbrellas, you'd think Batman would have disarmed Penguin. I mean, the last thing you want is a bad guy whose shtick is deadly custom-made umbrellas to have access to any of them.
You lanky, laughing, loony bird. You don't have as much brains as this dog.
See what I mean?
Today, Scooby-Doo meets the Globetrotters.
On a trip outside Boston to visit one of the gang's many uncles, they run into their friends, the Harlem Globetrotters, who are looking for rest after playing some basketball games in the city. Shaggy invites the team to spend the night at his uncle's mansion, but their time there is far from relaxing as they're visited by several ghosts from the American Revolution. And a sea serpent. 3 neighbors of Shaggy's Uncle Nathaniel discovered what they thought was a sunken treasure in a nearby cove. These greedy men, Morgan, Winslow, and Selby, decided to scare away the others in the community so they could keep all the gold to themselves. They did so by dressing up as the ghosts of Paul Revere, a Minuteman, and a Redcoat to frighten people on land while using a remote-controlled water monster to drive away boaters at sea. I racked my brains trying to come up with a Paul Revere, one if by land, two if by sea joke here, but just gave up. Much like how the Scooby Writers gave up when it came to finding any logical reason to shoehorn in a sea serpent in an episode devoted almost entirely to ghosts of the Revolutionary War. They even titled this one after the Loch Ness Monster, despite not being anywhere near the British Isles. The moat monster in the Davy Jones episode should have been a sea serpent, considering the castle had been brought over from Scotland, where Loch Ness is located. That would have made more sense than putting it here in the waters of New England. Appropriateness of the creature aside, Morgan, Winslow, and Selby followed the typical Scooby-Doo villain template of dressing up as ghosts to hide a treasure. But unfortunately for them, that treasure was a fake.
Gold? Sunken treasure? It's a fake, a dummy, like your sea serpent. Years ago, a movie company made a motion picture here because of the extra clear water. It was called Sunken Treasure.
And that ship is just part of an old movie set?
That's right. Why, they just left it there when the movie was finished.
Oddly enough, the real Loch Ness in Scotland has a sunken life-size Loch Ness monster prop lost during a film shoot there just a few years before this episode aired. This lost prop was rediscovered using underwater sonar in 2016. As explained by Uncle Nathaniel, the sunken ship and treasure were merely movie props and worthless, making the entire scheme of the villains worthless as well. On the plus side, as there was never any treasure to steal in the first place and nobody got hurt, a competent lawyer would likely be able to avoid trial and incarceration for his clients by securing a plea bargain for the 3 men for misdemeanor creating a public nuisance. As the crime wasn't worth getting caught, but would also likely result in no time served, I'm giving Morgan, Winslow, and Selby a neutral design score of 2.5 out of 5. This is only the second time that a villain dresses as the ghost of an actual historical figure, as well as the first time as anyone from the colonial era, so the 3 men score well for originality. Davy Crockett in the Jerry Reed episode wasn't a ghost, but instead a living mannequin, which admittedly may be splitting hairs, but in my opinion doesn't count the same.
Ghosts of the past roam these parts, strangers are not welcome, go.
Yeah!
I find it funny how the producers thought it was important that the Redcoat ghost here would have a British accent, when the earlier Minuteman ghost had a distinctive American accent. At the time these ghosts would have been alive, they would likely have had the same accent.
Maybe this'll stop him. Stop him? It didn't even slow him down.
One of their outfits also featured special effects like disappearing and flying, though these are never explained at any time in the episode. There's never any mention of film projectors or wire work. As none of the men were inside the sea serpent, this doesn't count as a disguise, but rather just a prop. So they won't gain points for this being the first time a monster like that appears, despite the Scooby franchise reusing the Loch Ness Monster to better effect several times in the future. Frankly, if Morgan, Winslow, and Selby wanted to scare people away from the Cove and retain the Revolutionary War theme they were going with, why didn't they just paint a boat white and pretend to be reenacting the Boston Tea Party? That would have made more sense and taken a lot less effort than using a sea serpent floaty. Though whichever one of them was able to create the flames coming out of the rubber creature's nose without melting or puncturing it deserves a lot of praise, not to mention the complex mechanics behind the remote control of the prop. It's also curious why Paul Revere and the Redcoat wore masks, but the Minuteman didn't. I wonder if when the three of them got together to show off their outfits, Morgan and Selby were pissed that Winslow seemed to be half-assing things. Then again, Winslow's disguise was the only one that floated or disappeared like a real ghost. So who were the ones really half-assing things? Morgan? Selby? This is also the second time in this series that a real horse was used as part of the villain's disguise. But as the gang weren't finding nails and horseshoes all over the place, Morgan clearly did a much better job on his mount's maintenance than the Earl of Strathmore. All their outfits can also be said to be effective, as Uncle Nathaniel was the only one in his neighborhood to remain while everyone else seemed to have been scared away. And speaking personally, the Redcoat is nightmare-inducing. I'm giving Morgan, Winslow, and Selby a 5 out of 5. I was tempted to drop them half a point for Winslow's lack of a mask, but he made up for it with the special effects used on his costume. I also almost dropped their costume score a bit for the accent thing, but not everyone can do one convincingly. I know mine suck.
We know what songs you like. We can tell from here because when we do a Beatles favorite, the place lights up. Your phones are like a galaxy of stars. Then when we do a new number, it's like a black hole. But we don't care. We're going to do them anyway.
There's really not much to say for how Morgan, Winslow, and Selby carried out their scheme. By the time the gang and the Globetrotters arrived, most of the neighborhood was already frightened away, with Uncle Nathaniel seemingly the only holdout. In addition to dressing up as the ghosts and putting a fake sea serpent in the cove where the treasure was hidden, the men also tried keeping tourists away by placing a barrier over the bridge Uncle Nathaniel built to attract visitors.
Like I don't remember that old bridge at all.
Of course you don't. I built it myself to add a bit of local color. Folks used to come from miles around to take pictures of it.
Did he literally build the bridge by hand, or did he hire a contractor to do it? Because something like that would take a lot of permits from the local building department, not to mention the approval of county engineers to make certain it wouldn't collapse when a tourist drives over it.
How come you let Shaggy take over the mystery machine?
He's the only one who knows the way to his Uncle Nat's place.
Go away.
That's good enough for me. I'm getting out of here.
Shaggy, wait! Hold up! I want to talk to you!
Shaggy's running like a scared rabbit. We'll never catch him.
Stop, Shaggy.
Yo, I can't!
You know, maybe there's a reason Fred doesn't let Shaggy drive the mystery machine that often.
Say, Shaggy, what are you doing in this neck of the woods?
Looking for you, Uncle Nat, but I sort of got mixed up.
While effective in scaring everyone else away, this time Winslow and Selby's ghost shenanigans ended up backfiring. They scared Shaggy into driving the mystery machine through the fake barrier, which attracted the attention of Uncle Nathaniel, who arrived to investigate. Up to that point, Shaggy had been so lost that it was possible they never would have made it to Uncle Nathaniel's mansion in the first place. As shown by the dialogue, the gang's visit was unscheduled, so it's not like Uncle Nathaniel would have been making any phone calls if they hadn't arrived.
Uncle Nathaniel.
Huh? How'd you know who I am?
Oh, that's easy. You're the spitting image of Shaggy.
Shaggy?
Now, I don't want to start any rumors, but with as much as Nathaniel looks like Shaggy, could somebody's mom have been, let's say, sharing her Scooby snacks with someone other than her husband? Once the gang and the Globetrotters made it to Uncle Nathaniel's mansion, one of the villains resorted to the usual antics of messing with Shaggy and Scooby by hiding behind paintings.
Huh?
The eyes.
Yeah, the eyes are a predominant characteristic, too.
And they move.
Well, that's just your imagination.
What the hell, Shaggy? Now you are gaslighting Scooby? By the way, it wasn't just the eyes. The entire face was moving. Why? How? An animator had to go out of their way to do that. If it was just the eyes, you'd think whoever was at the desk would be happy they could call it a day without having to draw as much. But they purposely animated the entire face. It's unknown which of the three bad guys is hiding behind the paintings, but regardless, this is just baffling. It's one thing if the villain needed to spy on the snoopers to see what they were doing, or if they were getting close to finding the hidden treasure, but that's not the case here. Uncle Nathaniel's mansion is miles away, and the important thing was just to scare people off. There's no point in spying like this.
There's a portrait of my great-grandfather, Nathaniel. And there's my great-great-grandfather, Scoob. His name is Benjamin. And there's my great-great-grandmother, Matilda.
Okay, forget what I said about Shaggy's mom and her brother-in-law. I'm pretty sure the Rogers family is just rife with inbreeding.
Look, there I am.
Hypertrichosis is no laughing matter.
I don't see anything about the eyes. But those ears!
And there's never any explanation as to why the ears are moving in this episode either.
So what are our plans for today?
Uncle Nat's been telling us about a cove not far from here.
Good fishing, water skiing, scuba diving?
Sounds terrific to me.
Sounds super great to me.
The next day at Uncle Nathaniel's suggestion, the gang and the Globetrotters decide to visit the nearby cove for fun on the water, not knowing about the sunken ship or treasure. Morgan, Winslow, and Selby are seen for the first time without their masks and immediately act suspiciously by refusing to rent boats to the teenagers or basketball players.
Hi.
Hey, stranger.
We'd like to rent some boats.
We're closed.
Closed? Man, you got a sign right out there says boats for rent, and you tell us you're closed.
What kind of business are you running anyway?
Isn't our money any good?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna complain.
Just a minute, folks. No use getting all heated up like this. Is there, Winslow?
No. I don't suppose there'd be any harm in letting out a couple of boats.
The reason Morgan, Winslow, and Selby didn't want to rent their boats to the Globetrotters was because they were trying to keep the location of a treasure secret. It sucks that in real life, they might have been saying no for a completely different reason. Boston isn't the Deep South, but it's not exactly not the Deep South either. And this was the early 1970s. While scuba diving, Scooby discovers the sunken ship, so the villains were right trying to discourage boating activities, but if they really wanted to keep anyone from renting their boats, why the hell did they leave the rental sign up on the shack? Or spend some time coming up with a plausible reason for not renting them out. Sorry, young fellers, but we can't rent our boats out today. We forgot to renew our merchant's license with the state and can't legally operate our business until that gets settled. Yeah, I told you my accents are shit.
Oh my gosh, look!
It was unbelievable.
Sure was.
It was as big as a house.
Oh, bigger.
You don't suppose Shaggy could be exaggerating just a teensy-weensy little bit?
This time, Shaggy has witnesses.
That's right. and it was a pretty scary thing.
Ordinarily, I'd be angry about them not believing Shaggy, but remember earlier when Shaggy didn't believe Scooby about the eyes on the painting? Shaggy deserves it this time.
It just occurred to me that there just might be some connection between those ghosts and our Loch Ness Monster.
It's supposed to be a sea serpent that people claim to see every so often.
Yet nobody has ever taken a photograph of it.
There was, of course, the famous surgeon's photograph of the Loch Ness Monster taken in 1934, but that was a hoax. So technically, Fred was correct. Later, after Winslow and Selby chased the girls and some of the Globetrotters into an abandoned house in the woods, this happened.
There's no escape for ye.
Everyone ran outside. Winslow and Selby just trapped themselves in the house, except the front door was on the outside. And it was broken. That's the problem when your show is so sloppily produced. Occasionally, it's difficult to determine if a villain makes a mistake or it was just the animators again. Of course, the absolute biggest blunder made by Morgan, Winslow, and Selby is not determining if the treasure was legitimate in the first place.
It's a fake, a dummy, like your sea serpent.
What do you mean, fake? I saw the gold.
If Morgan had discovered the sunken ship, and while investigating the inside, also found a chest supposedly filled with gold, why wouldn't he have taken some of that gold with him? It's one thing if you're diving in a shipwreck that was officially designated as an underwater gravesite because it would have been drilled into your head not to disturb any artifacts you might come across down there. But if, as far as you know, you're the first to find gold in a sunken ship, how could you not grab a few coins to bring back with you to the surface? If nothing else, you would want evidence of your find so you could convince others to help you salvage it, like what Morgan did with Winslow and Selby. Had he taken the time to do this one simple thing, it would have been immediately clear that whatever gold was down there was fake. It's unlikely a film crew from the 1940s would have spent much time creating fake gold that would fool even a casual observer holding a piece in their hands. I'm giving the trio of Colonial Ghosts an operation score of 1.5 out of 5. While most of the mistakes they made wouldn't ordinarily cause such a low rating, the fact that the entire reason for their scheme in the first place was built on a false premise, they're lucky to be awarded with even that much. Morgan, Winslow, and Selby get a final due score of 3 out of 5. It's a pity their planning and disguise skills were wasted here instead of somewhere with an actual hidden treasure. Perhaps they should plan a trip to Vasquez Castle. Who's that in the back of the Globetrotters van? I suppose whoever animated this scene didn't get the note that Dribbles and Granny weren't in this episode.
Well, mighty peculiar things have been happening of late.
Were the Globetrotters born in a barn? Close the door!
Will you close the f***ing doors?
Nervous?
Uh-huh.
Well, just remember the old saying. You can always whistle your fears away.
Now that sounds like a good idea.
Whistle your fears away is not an expression I've ever heard before. I even Googled it and found nothing. To be safe, I contacted my boomer expert and she said she'd never heard of it either. What's more, why would Shaggy of all people be trying to counsel Scooby on not being afraid? That's the pot calling the kettle black, but only if the pot was dyed with Vanta Black. Here's what I think happened. The producers probably told the writers to squeeze in a moment for basketball shenanigans so they could save a few bucks by reusing 40 or more seconds of already rendered animation. So they used a made-up expression about whistling as a segue to the Globetrotters because the Harlem Globetrotters famously used a whistled version of Sweet Georgia Brown as their theme. If you don't know the song I'm talking about, just Google Harlem Globetrotters and wait 5 seconds. I'm not going to risk playing any of it here because I already get enough YouTube copyright matches. But that whistled theme isn't used here. Instead, the Globetrotters bounce their basketballs around, accompanied by a generic studio track that doesn't contain any whistling, making me wonder if the writers included this bit, but the producers couldn't secure the rights to use Sweet Georgia Brown. Hanna-Barbera didn't even want to pay for a real laugh track, so this sounds possible. It's also possible that the original broadcast version of this episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies originally contained Sweet Georgia Brown, but the song wasn't licensed for home video or streaming use. I can't find anything online that confirms this theory, so for now we'll just have to assume the writers wrote a check that Hanna-Barbera was just too cheap to cash.
Always keep one of these handy. Bullseye! Who is he?
Name's Morgan.
Good thing for Morgan that wasn't a beach ball. 1970s beach balls were as hard as a rock, apparently. And that's my ranking of the villains from the final set of episodes of the first season of the new Scooby-Doo movies, shown here along with the ones from my previous videos. It was surprising to see how Joker and Penguin did slightly worse when they were calling the shots themselves compared to when they were working for Mrs. Baker. It was also nice to see a decent score one more time before finishing this season. Overall, the villains featured in the new Scooby-Doo movies were lackluster at best, with very few managing a do score of 3 or higher and only one managing a 4. Very disappointing, considering almost half the bad guys of Where Are You scored higher than a 3, with several over 4, and one that even got a 5. Then again, none of the villains in the new Scooby-Doo movies scored as low as 1 either. Carl the Stuntman. I hope to see you next time when I'll be starting on Season 2. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. 8-track cassettes didn't need rewinding. They were on a continuous loop tape. You could fast forward and skip from one track to another, but they were never meant to be rewound.